Hello everyone. Today we are going to review the movie Fantasy Island. This is another Amazon Prime feature, and I don't have my phone. So yeah, this movie definitely, I wouldn't say it had so many comedy elements in it, although it definitely had adventure and horror elements to it, although it wasn't as scary of a movie as I thought it was going to be. But yeah, so basically, these five people who, it makes it basically look like they don't really know one another in the beginning, and the main character is living out the fantasy that she wanted to propose to, or she wanted to say yes to the man who proposed to her 5 years ago, but she never did. I guess she kind of got cold feet in a way, or wasn't in the right place wasn't just wasn't there in her heart at that time, I guess. But if she could go back, she would say yes. So that's the fantasy she gets, and then she realizes she's made this horrible mistake. The do-over that she really would have wanted was to save the man in the burning building, her apartment building, because this fire started due to her. We find out later on in the movie that she was making tea in this kettle, and then all of a sudden she forgets about the burner, leaves it on when she's gone, and by the time she comes back, there's this fire that's broken out in the apartment complex that she's in. She then realizes that the policeman that was there is on the island. The two brothers lived in the same apartment building as her on the island, but they can't figure out why the one girl is there was bullied by another girl that was there that was actually kidnapped. At the beginning of the movie, it shows her being kidnapped, and she's trying to make this call, and she ends up just being trapped on the island. And then this one girl's fantasy is to get back at her bully or tormentor throughout the years. And then when she realizes that it's real and not a hologram, she decides to save her. And then as the movie goes on, things just get stranger and stranger, and they keep seeing this one guy that eventually brings them all together, because they realize they were all at the same place at the same time at the end of the movie. So they keep seeing this burn victim, and they don't really know why. Clearly all of them, or most of them, don't know why. And eventually they start being kind of picked off one by one and dying. The two girls, the one that did the bullying, the one that was bullied, they kind of almost, it seems like they're becoming friends, and they find this PI who's been on the island, who's trying to investigate what's going on the island. He ends up having to save their lives because she talks about this one teacher or psychiatrist, I guess, maybe, that she had, or something to do with, I believe it was a teacher that just, kept talking and talking and talking, and she just wanted to staple his mouth shut. She called him Dr. Torture. So maybe it was some sort of like a psychiatrist or something, or therapist, to kind of help her through her issues of being bullied and feeling like she wasn't needed or wanted, or those kinds of things. So when she realizes that it's not a hologram and it's a fantasy, or not a fantasy, not a hologram, it's real life, she decides to basically, save the girl. But before that, this guy comes out with his mouth stapled shut, so it's like Dr. Torture, right, kind of deal. And so she has to get him knocked down in order to come in and save the girl. And then you find out that she's a guest on the island, and the girl that did the bullying was like, oh my god, what, like, this was your fantasy to get back at me after all these years. And then the PI eventually has to risk his life saving them from this Dr. Torture character, because even though he dies, he comes back to life in this weird, like, zombified way. I don't really know how to describe that. It's like they were possessed almost in some sort of way. Everybody that dies on the island that was already part of the, I guess, so-called fantasy comes back to life, and they can't be killed. And the fantasy, I guess, kind of plays out in a twisted way. It's really strange. So yeah, then eventually at the end of the movie, you find out that the girl that only had a connection with Nick, the character that died in the fire once, was the one who had set up this ultimate fantasy to have all of these people killed because she felt obviously unwanted, and I guess she realized that she wasn't as unwanted as she thought. It was just that he died, and she blamed all of them for not being able to live out her true life fantasy, which would have been being with Nick, I guess, because she felt like they had some sort of connection. But obviously, that's a little bit far-fetched, I would say, as to go and kill a bunch of people for having one date with this guy, and then I guess setting up their first real date, and yeah, going after them and basically setting up this fantasy that they wanted to kill you, or you wanted them dead, is kind of a bit far-fetched, but I guess, hey, if somebody's willing to set that up for you, to each his own, right? So then the girl that did the bullying at the end of the movie, her fantasy was for, I guess, the other girl and Nick to spend the rest of their lives together. So she ends up getting dragged into the pool at the end from Nick's I don't know how to describe it, ghost kind of thing, I guess, because he's dead, right? So it's this movie really messes with your head. It's kind of like a psychological thriller as opposed to a horror movie. It did have some horror elements to it, I suppose, but it wasn't really like a top of the line scary movie, I wouldn't say. So, but yeah, it was a really good movie. It kept you guessing as to who was the person actually whose fantasy it was, is what I'm trying to say. And then at the end of the movie, you find out whose it is, and you were like, oh. So it wasn't a predictable movie, because I find a lot of these movies that follow this kind of storyline, you can really tell who is setting everything up right from the beginning, but they kept keeping you guessing as to whether it was the owner of the island, Mr. Rourke, or whether it was just each individual person's fantasy, because it seems like almost at some points in the movie, everybody on the island has their own fantasy, and they end up just intertwining together, and then they're realizing, shit, this isn't our fantasy, this is somebody else's fantasy, and they just were hoping that we'd all eventually kill one another, I guess, is what the hope was. Or that they would die by the hands of, obviously, these people that kind of come back from the dead, I guess, in a certain weird way. But anyhow, I wasn't really sure what to expect from this movie, because the previews kind of made it seem like almost like a Saw type thing, where they just go onto this island and kind of torture the people that did them wrong, which I guess in a way the one girl did, because she put them through an awful lot for what she felt they had done to her. So yeah, it was kind of a messed up, twisted thing for her to do, but I guess they kind of were, at least some of them were able to survive, and then the one brother stays on the island because unfortunately his brother gets killed in the line of fire between these military guys and these other guys that had come back to life that were looking for drugs and weapons and so on and so forth. It was really strange how they came back to life. I still can't really figure that out. I guess maybe that was just the power of the island itself, bringing these people back to life as part of the fantasy. Really strange. But I guess it was this one girl's fantasy, so who knows what she had thought up in her head as to how everything would have played out. But yeah, really good movie. Highly recommend watching it. It was one that I wanted to go see in theaters, but unfortunately, I think didn't this just come out last year? I believe, yeah, so unfortunately, theaters weren't really in the playbooks for last year, even though when they were open, I suppose I could have gone, but I just kind of wanted to stay away from that whole scene until things get back to normal and they're actually open properly. But yeah, 10 out of 10 on this movie. I really liked it. I guess there were some comedy elements to it, but I wouldn't really say this was a comedy movie. I suppose there were some funny lines in it, but yeah, I wouldn't really say overall this was like this genre that they were going for was comedy in this movie. That's for sure. But yeah, 10 out of 10. So please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on this film if you've seen it, because I thought this was really good, and I like the psychological thriller / horror movies that just keep you guessing from beginning to end as to who did it, and you don't figure it out right away. It's like a split second before you're like, oh, that's what's happening here. And I might have to go back and watch this again on my own time. Well, I mean, it's not like I wasn't watching it on my own time again. Or it wasn't like I wasn't watching it on my own time this time, but I'll have to go back and watch it again to kind of maybe figure out some of the stuff that I was really missing in this movie, because I feel like there was more to some of what was happening on the island that I just wasn't picking up on, especially the scenes in the caves. But I won't say anything more on that because I'll let you have your own interpretation of that. But anyhow, that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.